Hi, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Academic Success webinar series. I am Ashley Bray. I'm the Disability and Learning Skills Advisor for the School of Continuing Studies. I am here with my colleague, Annie Balot. She's the Learning Skills Specialist for Maine campus. Today, we're going to be talking about online test-taking strategies. It's the second part of our two-part series looking at online classrooms and just talking about resources and strategies to use when you might be taking an online class. Before we get started, as always, just a little housekeeping to make sure to stay up to date on our most recent happenings, events, resources. You can follow us on Facebook, which is ARC at ARC Georgetown, and then on Instagram at ARC_Georgetown. We post resources, always reminders for our webinars and events, so make sure you're following us there. As always, you can check out more in-depth resources on our website, which is academicsupport.georgetown.edu. And there's downloadable academic resources on time management, study skill strategies. We are going to be putting up a couple on our online testing resources. You can also find there all of our archived webinars, as well as drop-in foreign language tutoring hours, other campus resources, and our monthly ARC newsletter. Finally, we are about halfway through the semester. So halfway through our webinar series, we have 3 left. Our next one will be on Wednesday, November 7th at 1 p.m. And we will be talking about test anxiety tips and some strategies to use when maybe you're taking exams, feeling a little anxious, when you're preparing for exams. So we'll talk through some strategies and resources there. Finally, we'll come back after the Thanksgiving break and talk about the all-important sleep habits, which we think is an appropriate timing as people start preparing for finals and wrapping up loose ends of the semester. And then finally, we will do our semesterly annual final exam webinar on Wednesday, December 5th at 1 p.m. As always, our webinars can be found on the Zoom link provided, and they happen at 1 p.m. You can find out all of our archived webinars from the past 2 semesters along with this semester on our website. All right, just to start, we wanted to talk a little bit about recapping from last webinar. And if you weren't able to join us, we talked about managing the online classroom. So thought this was a great place for us to start before we really got into our discussion around online test-taking strategies. So first, the most important part of taking an online class is determining what type of class it is, whether it's an asynchronous or synchronous class. An asynchronous class means that you're going to be able to kind of manage the workload at your own speed. So there's not going to be a set time or date every week that you're meeting. There will probably be detailed work due, probably most likely on a weekly basis, maybe even on a daily basis, that will be outlined in your syllabus, but you're not meeting per se. So you're not all jumping on a Zoom session to talk with all your classmates and your professor at the same time every week. A synchronous class is just that. You will have a dedicated time of the week and dedicated date of the week where you are getting on a Zoom session or via Canvas or Blackboard to participate in a classroom just as you would in an on-the-ground class. So determining what type of class you're in is a good place to start before making your plan of how to manage the online classroom. And then I think the key piece here, it really goes back to the foundations of time management, which we love to talk about, and that's developing a routine, right? So if you are in an asynchronous class, this is especially important to develop a routine and make this a non-negotiable. So are you dedicating a certain amount of time every day to be quote unquote online in the classroom? Are you answering the discussion boards, going through the PowerPoint, maybe the recorded videos or slides, and really making sure you're understanding the material? This should be implement it into your calendar. So if this is every day, Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30, or 7 to 9, that's a non-negotiable. You should treat that just like you would any other commitment with work or school. I would also encourage students who are in online classes to develop a routine and maybe set reminders in your calendar or on your phones or wherever you're keeping your time management system of making sure you're logging in every day. That actually is something that faculty can keep track of, is how many times you've logged into the site to check materials. So put yourself a good 5-10-minute reminder on your calendar every day at a time that works best for you. Maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's at lunchtime. Log in at that time every day. Just check the announcement boards. Maybe you have some discussion boards that you posted. Maybe that also includes checking your email. This is probably the main form of communication, which we'll get to in a little bit, but develop that routine, put it into the calendar, and stick with it. Another huge thing for managing the online classroom is getting rid of distractors. So when you are talking about taking online classes, you should really be creating the classroom environment at home, at work, or wherever it is that you have decided is an appropriate place for you to take the class. If you are doing it at home, I don't recommend doing it, laying in bed with, the TV on in the background. Can you use a study? Do you have an office? If you have roommates, pets, or kids, or family, make sure that they know when you're going to be online and, quote, in class. This is going to help cause distractions. We know life happens. If home isn't a good place for you to do this, maybe it's doing it at work, staying an hour or two after work to make this environment work for you. Make sure that you don't have those distractors. You're not getting distracted by laundry, things at home. Maybe it's going to a coffee shop. Maybe it's using the library on campus, but finding out what really works for you is really important. And this is an ever-evolving process. So I think if you're new to the online classroom world, it will take a couple of tries, but really keep track of what works and what doesn't. And finally, the last 2 points I just want to cover is defining participation. So this is especially important if you're in asynchronous classes. You don't have attendance every day, right? You don't have that space where you can interact with your peers or interact with the professor. So what is participation to your faculty member? How are they defining that? How are they greeting it? Is it discussion boards? Is it logging in every day? Is it a weekly paper? Is it replying to other discussion board comments? What does that look like? Make sure you're clear on that. And of course, if you're not clear, ask. And that leads us to our final point, communication. Staying connected is so key to being successful in the online classroom. If you have questions, reach out. Get a phone call with your faculty member, schedule weekly office hours, start a Zoom session. Find peers in your class who are kind of going through this online degree or classroom journey with you, and stay connected with them. So that way you're still getting that experience, because the more you put into the online classroom, the more you're going to get out of it. But communicate, 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 and that cannot be stressed enough. So that's a quick recap from last week, and then we'll go ahead and I'll hand it off to Annie to start us on online test taking strategies.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Ashley. So even before you start an online exam, we want to talk about a few things to consider and keep in mind during the preparation stage. So the first one is to know, understand, and review the test guidelines of how you're going to be assessed. Okay, so knowing, are you having to take the test at a specific date and time? Or like Ashley was talking about, maybe there isn't a specific date and time and you can take it just during a particular window of time. So knowing the parameters of the test is really important before even getting started. Because we would hate to hear that you missed a test because you didn't know that it was at a certain date, it was at a certain time period, and you were thinking I could just take it at any day on this Wednesday. So knowing when you need to take the test is definite first step. Knowing how much time you have to take the test. A lot of online exams put time parameters on the exam. It's not an unlimited amount of time, right? You still are setting up our test-taking environment like a typical on-the-ground test. So still having, a certain amount of time to complete the test is something to consider and something that you definitely want to have in mind when beginning the test. And is it something that you can take it home? Like Ashley was talking about environment, really being aware of the environment in which you are engaging in the online course. Is home the best place to take the test, or do you need to be in a specific location with other peers? Or is there another place on campus that you can go in order to access some online materials in order to take the test? So knowing the date, the time, the location, and how much time you have are really good factors to consider before even beginning the online exam.
And I think something else, Annie, that students could think about is sometimes with not maybe our larger exams, but some of the quizzes, faculty will allow you a couple different tries on those quizzes, right? So maybe you get 3 or 4 different tries to get a certain score. So really understanding what those requirements are as well. Because I've had students in the past who have thought they might have gotten 2 quizzes because that's happened in another, 2 tries for a quiz because that's happened in another class, but for this one you only get 1. So understanding how many times you get to take the exam is really important as well.
And where is that information usually located, Ashley?
So it should be usually located in your syllabi. It should be outlined in your syllabi. If it is not, follow up with your professor, but also usually on Canvas or Blackboard during the exam section or the test quiz section, when you log in, sometimes they'll detail how many tries you get along with the time frame as well. So really making sure you're stopping and reading those screens as you're going through that process and just not clicking through.
Yeah, we don't want it to just be a checkbox, something that you look at once and never go back to. So definitely refer to your Canvas, your Blackboard page, and if you're still confused or not sure, reach out to your professor. Wonderful. So next step is to know or have an idea of what the test format is going to be. And this is something that is related to all exams, but definitely for online exams, so that you can start preparing. You can maybe mimic how you're going to be assessed during your study time. So knowing the types of questions that the instructor may use. Is it multiple choice? Is it fill-in? Is it short answer? Are you going to have 30 minutes to write an essay? So knowing the different components of the exam is a really good strategy for all test taking, but definitely for online, so you can prepare yourself ahead of time. And we're going to get into a few other factors, but time comes into a big part of it, right? So if you are under certain time constraints, just knowing that information ahead of time so you can plan out, okay, maybe I want to take, this amount of time to do multiple choice, but then I really want to leave a bulk of the chunk of time at the end to do the essay. So knowing the test format, and then again, kind of thinking about the amount of time that you want to take to complete those. The next thing, of course, is check your computer. We talked about this last webinar as well. And make sure that your electronics, whatever you're using, is up to par and it's working, it's fully charged, it's fully backed up, whatever that means to you and your electronics, but ensuring that we are avoiding at all costs any last-minute problems.
And I understand maintaining and buying electronics is really, really expensive. We get that, we understand that. It's a struggle for a lot of our students. It's a struggle for us sometimes as well. So, if you don't have a computer that's the most reliable, is there friends that you can borrow? Is there free resources with the library? I know Georgetown has a lot of great resources with the library about using computers and using media. So check those out. Make sure you find it. If you're in another state, typically your public library will have computers that you can use. And oftentimes, students are there using them for online tests and online classes because they're a little bit more reliable. So just wanted to point that out and make sure you check what resources you have available to you locally. All right, so sticking on the topic of preparing for exams, carve out a quiet test-taking spot with minimal distractions. And we talk about this a lot with just on-the-ground classes, but it's especially important for online classes. Practice doing the work and taking practice online exams in the environment prior to the actual exam, right? So you might not be able to fully log into Canvas or Blackboard and take the exam, but practice of what your setup looks like. So you know how much, if you have to take the exam at a specific time, you know how long it takes you to get ready. So you're not kind of running into, I'm still trying to get the computer set up and booted and all my resources together, and I have to take the exam by 2. So practice getting into that environment, making sure, again, you're in an environment that has minimal distractions, that has a good connection to the internet, and that you're not going to get sidetracked by family, friends, pets, TV, all the good things in life. And then on that note, I think gathering your resources. Most online exams, just by default, unless you're taking them in a proctored area, are kind of open book, open test. Obviously, you need to check with your professor and your syllabi before that first. But I think for a lot of students, what they find when they're taking kind of open resources exams is that they're more challenging than those that are closed book. And part of that is because we spend so much time trying to gather up our resources or look through our resources. So how are you prepping those resources beforehand? So just not the technology and having that scratch piece of paper like Annie mentioned, but are there things that you need to reference during an essay, right? Are you going to have to cite something? Do you have those places already flagged or bookmarked before you take the exam? So really making sure you're prepared. And then I did just want to ask Annie, if we can't get online on Blackboard and Canvas taking practice tests, are there an app that maybe we could use to just practice? I think Quizlet is one of those we can use in the app form as well as online.
Yep, absolutely. There are pre-made quizzes that are from people around the world, maybe on the same concept that they've already created quizzes for. So you can, look through search the database that Quizlet already has to see if the material matches what you or the student is learning in the classroom, and see if those types of questions or those practice exams could be of assistance. I would definitely double check to make sure that the information matches what you are covering in class as well, just to make sure that the information is the same and it's relatable to what you are learning. But yeah, absolutely. Quizlet's a great resource to look up pre-made questions or pre-made exams. And hopefully, again, if your professors do provide practice exams, we highly encourage you to take those. Those are really good practice. And even coming up with your own questions. So looking through notes that you have, coming up with questions that you anticipate or predict are going to be on the exam, and then answering it. That's a really great self-testing strategy.
And a great online format to do that in that everyone should have access to because it's free and it's pretty easy to use is Google Forms. So not only are you getting the practice and kind of just cementing the material in your head as you're making up your own questions, but you're also getting that practice of going through and clicking in an online space. And again, time yourself during this, recreate that online testing environment.
All right, so we've kind of talked and alluded to keeping an eye on the clock, but this is definitely important while you're in the online exam. So we really are talking about the focus part while you are taking that exam. One of the main strategies that I talk with students that are in the ground courses as well as online courses is to do a preview of the exam if possible before getting started, and then think about how much time or estimate how much time you want to take on certain sections. Again, if you're on an online exam and you might not necessarily be able to flip through into the end to see what types of questions are going to be on it, but that's where knowing ahead of time the types of questions is really going to be helpful. But keeping an eye on the clock, so estimating how much time you want to spend on the multiple choice section and how much time you want to allot at the end towards the essay, and maybe setting an alarm on your phone for, I want to spend 20 minutes on this first section because I know this essay is going to take some intense, writing and doing some brainstorm, and I really want to make sure I have enough time. Set a reminder, set an alarm on your phone, on your computer, whatever it might be, in order to make sure that you are staying on time and really tracking where your time is going. And so if your test does require some sort of short answer or essay question, the best advice that we can give is to input this information or write your information in a separate word processing program, okay? This will make it easier to edit, to check your work. Not everything on Canvas or Blackboard might do spell check or proofread. So we really want to do that in a word processing program where we have the time, we have the capabilities of editing, checking, proofreading to ensure that our information and our answers actually match what we intended. And then you just cut and paste it right into the designated field.
And I think sometimes it is important to note that some exams, that's not always going to be the option to cut and paste for words. So again, going back to that first slide, talking about what are the testing guidelines, what is that test going to look like, and really understanding that up front.
Yes, and I think that's a great question too. If you are unsure, it's not clear, if you are allowed to use another word processing program for the short answer, the essay questions, ask your professor, ask your faculty member to say, would this be allowed during the final exam? It really helps me kind of get my thoughts down. And you know, it gives you that space to edit, to revise, proofread, all of that good stuff. And then definitely, like we've mentioned before, utilize all the tools that are available to you. So if you are allowed, again, asking clarification from your professor or faculty prior to the exam, if you're allowed to have scrap paper near you for doing a math equation, or maybe just doing a brainstorm for an essay that you have, that would be really helpful. For a lot of students, writing things down in their own words is a great study strategy. And if you need that tool available to you during the online exam, I would definitely encourage you to ask.
Great. And finally, during the online exam, don't leave the test page. This is actually something I've done. I've accidentally hit a back key before, and then I've lost my entire exam, and it's traumatic. So don't leave the test page. If you are permitted to search the web or check other websites or resources, don't use the same tab, you know, or copy the browser as you do for your exam. You may lose all your work. So my best recommendation is open up a whole new window or use 2 different browsing platforms, right? Maybe Google Chrome for taking the exam and Firefox for browsing the internet. And also another piece, trying to go back to understanding testing guidelines, find out what browser works best for you, right? What are you more comfortable with using, and make sure you're using that. But don't leave the test page. Really, I think the most important thing we can hit home on. And then check your work before you submit. So just like you would with any regular exam, go back, review for spelling errors, especially if you're doing it online and typing. There's probably a higher expectation around grammatical and spelling errors because you do have spell check as a resource. But review your work to ensure that every answer is completed and appears as you intended, so making sure you didn't accidentally hit B or false on a couple questions when you might have hit true or A. And then finally, if there are technical problems, don't panic. They might happen. It's very real. Online, the internet is not always as trustworthy as we want it to be. So contact your instructor immediately, detailing the exact problem that occurred and any error messages that you might have received, and then take a screenshot if possible. I know there's been a couple of times with students, even here, taking online exams through the ARC during finals that they've had a couple of errors with the program that they were using. And I will say every time that has occurred, we've just taken a screenshot of what's happened and emailed the professor right away, and the professors are usually always very understanding. So just, again, don't panic, but like have a plan into action. This is one of the things you should be thinking about as you're preparing for the exam. If something goes wrong, what is my plan to correct it, and how am I communicating that with the professor? And this is also a great thing to ask at the beginning of the semester. What should we do if something goes wrong during the exam?
Yep, exactly. I think that's the best thing to ask the professor, is just having a backup plan like Ashley mentioned. You know, hey professor, I know we've got this exam scheduled next week. Should I contact you via email? Will you be on Canvas? Maybe can I chat you somehow? So really figuring out, just if the worst case happens, you do have a backup plan, and really taking screenshots is the best, so we can see real life what your screen is showing. So if there's an error message that pops up, the professor can troubleshoot for you or help you through. But yeah, definitely take screenshots, but don't panic. It potentially may happen, but we can work together to resolve it.
And a lot of faculty and professors usually tend to be online when their exams are being given or provide you with a phone number to reach them at. I would also recommend having UIS's or your tech support phone number in your phone as well, just in case. That way if something does happen, those resources are readily available and you can use them. But don't panic, set a plan, and you should be okay. All right, so that concludes today's webinar. Hopefully we provided some good resources and strategies for you all to think about as you're taking exams online, and hopefully minimize some of the stress. If you want to talk more about minimizing stress during test taking, please join us on Wednesday, November 7th for our test taking anxiety tips. In the meantime, make sure you're using all of our wonderful resources on our website. And as always, Annie and I are here to provide more individual one-on-one consultations around study skill strategies. If you have feedback for us or have other suggestions of webinar topics or have a question that didn't get answered, you can always contact us through the feedback survey, and it's https://tinyurl.com/ARC-webinar-feedback. And that's it for us today, and we hope you guys all have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.